Somatosensory system and somatomotor system. Chapter 144. Somatosensory system. Definition and types of sensations. Somatosensory system is defined as the sensory system associated with different parts of the body. Sensations are of two types: somatic sensations, special sensations. Somatic sensations. Somatic sensations are the sensations arising from skin, muscles, tendons, and joints. These sensations have specific receptors, which respond to a particular type of stimulus. Special sensations. Special sensations are the complex sensations for which the body has some specialized sense organs. These sensations are usually called special senses. Sensations of vision, hearing, taste, and smell are the special sensations. This chapter deals with somatic sensations. Types of somatic sensations. Generally, somatic sensations are classified into three types: epicritic sensations, protopathic sensations, deep sensations. Epicritic sensations. Epicritic sensations are the mild or light sensations. Such sensations are perceived more accurately. Epicritic sensations are fine touch or tactile sensation, Chapter 143. Tactile localization, Chapter 143. Tactile discrimination, Chapter 143. Temperature sensation with finer range between 25 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. Protopathic sensations. Protopathic sensations are the crude sensations. These sensations are primitive type of sensations. Protopathic sensations are pressure sensation, Chapter 143. Pain sensation, Chapter 143. Temperature sensation with a wider range, i.e. above 40 degrees Celsius and below 25 degrees Celsius. Deep sensations. Deep sensations are sensations arising from deeper structures beneath the skin and visceral organs. Deep sensations are sensation of vibration or palæsthesia, which is the combination of touch and pressure sensation, Chapter 143. Kinesthetic sensation or kinesthesia, sensation of position and movements of different parts of the body. This sensation arises from the proprioceptors present in muscles, tendons, joints, and ligaments. Proprioceptors are the receptors, which give response during various movements of a joint. Kinesthetic sensation is of two types: conscious kinesthetic sensation, Chapter 143. Subconscious kinesthetic sensation, Chapter 143. Impulses of this sensation are called non-sensory impulses. Visceral sensations arising from viscera, Fig. 144.1. Synthetic senses. Synthetic senses are the sensations synthesized at cortical level, by integration of impulses of basic sensations. Two or more basic sensations are combined in some of the synthetic senses. Best examples of synthetic senses are vibratory sensation, stereognosis, and two-point discrimination. Sensory pathways. Nervous pathways of sensations are called the sensory pathways. These pathways carry the impulses from receptors in different parts of the body to centers in brain. Sensory pathways are of two types: pathways of somatosensory system, pathways of viscerosensory system. Pathways of somatosensory system convey the information from sensory receptors in skin, skeletal muscles, and joints. Pathways of this system are constituted by somatic nerve fibers called somatic afferent nerve fibers. Pathways of viscerosensory system convey the information from receptors of the viscera. Pathways of this system are constituted by visceral or autonomic fibers. This chapter deals mainly with the somatosensory system. Somatosensory pathways. Each sensory pathway is constituted by two or three groups of neurons: first-order neurons, second-order neurons, third-order neurons. Details of these neurons are given in Chapter 143. Pathways of some sensations like kinesthetic sensation have only first and second-order neurons. Details of pathways are given in Table 144.1. Diagrams of pathways are given in Chapter 143, along with ascending tracts of spinal cord. Sensory fibers of trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve carries somatosensory information from face, teeth, periodontal tissues, tissues around teeth, oral cavity, nasal cavity, cranial dura mater and major part of scalp to sensory cortex. It also conveys proprioceptive impulses from the extrinsic muscles of the eyeball. Origin. Sensory fibers of trigeminal nerve arise from the trigeminal ganglion situated near temporal bone. Peripheral processes of neurons in this ganglion form three divisions of trigeminal nerve, namely ophthalmic, mandibular and maxillary divisions. Cutaneous distribution of the three divisions of trigeminal nerve is shown in Figure 144.2. Central processes from neurons of trigeminal ganglion enter pons in the form of sensory root. Termination. After reaching the pons, fibers of sensory root divide into two groups, namely descending fibers and ascending fibers. Descending fibers terminate on primary sensory nucleus and spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Primary sensory nucleus is situated in pons. Spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve is situated below the primary sensory nucleus and extends up to the upper segments of spinal cord. Ascending fibers of sensory root terminate in the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve, situated in brainstem above the level of primary sensory nucleus, Fig 144.3. Central connections. Majority of fibers from the primary sensory nucleus and spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve ascend in the form of trigeminal lemniscus and terminate in ventral posteromedial nucleus of thalamus in the opposite side. Remaining fibers from these two nuclei terminate on the thalamic nucleus of same side. From thalamus, the fibers pass via superior thalamic radiation and reach the somatosensory areas of cerebral cortex. Primary sensory nucleus and spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve relay the sensations of touch, pressure, pain, and temperature from the regions mentioned above. Fibers from mesencephalic nucleus form the trigeminocerebellar tract that enters spina cerebellum via the superior cerebellar peduncle of the same side. This nucleus conveys proprioceptive impulses from facial muscles, muscles of mastication and ocular muscles. Lemniscus. Lemniscus or fillet is the prominent bundle of sensory nerves in brain. Lemniscus is of four types: spinal lemniscus formed by spinothalamic tracts in medulla oblongata. Lateral lemniscus formed by the fibers carrying sensation of hearing from cochlear nuclei to inferior colliculus and medial geniculate body. Medial lemniscus formed by fibers arising from nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis. Trigeminal lemniscus formed by fibers from sensory nuclei of trigeminal nerve. This lemniscus carries general senses from head, neck, face, mouth, eyeballs, and ears. Applied physiology. Lesions or other nervous disorders in sensory pathway affect the sensory functions of the body. The effects are given in Table 144.2. Somatomotor system. Motor activities of the body. Motor activities of the body depend upon different groups of tissues of the body. Motor activities are divided into two types: activities of skeletal muscles, which are involved in posture and movement. Activities of smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and other tissues, which are involved in the functions of various visceral organs. Activities of skeletal muscles, voluntary functions, are controlled by somatomotor system, which is constituted by the somatic motor nerve fibers. Activities of tissues or visceral organs, involuntary functions, are controlled by visceral or autonomic nervous system, which is constituted by the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Autonomic nervous system is described in Chapter 164. This chapter deals with somatomotor system. Somatomotor system. Movements of the body depend upon different groups of skeletal muscles. Various types of movements or motor activities brought about by these muscles are: execution of smooth, precise, and accurate voluntary movements. Coordination of movements responsible for skilled activities. Coordination of movements responsible for the maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Voluntary actions and postural movements are carried out by not only the simple contraction and relaxation of skeletal muscles but also the adjustments of tone in these muscles. The execution, planning, coordination, and adjustments of movements of the body are under the influence of different parts of nervous system, which are together called motor system. Sensory system of the body also plays a vital role in the control of movements. Spinal reflexes are responsible for most of the movements concerned with voluntary actions and posture. Stimulation of receptor activates the motor neuron in spinal cord, leading to the contraction of muscle innervat by spinal motor neuron. Apart from these reflexes, signals for voluntary motor activities are also sent from different areas of the brain, particularly the cerebral cortex to spinal motor neurons. Coordination and control of movements initiated by cerebral cortex depends upon two factors: feedback signals from proprioceptors in muscle and other sensory receptors, interaction of other parts of brain such as brainstem, cerebellum and basal ganglia. Cerebellum and basal ganglia. Neuronal circuits between these parts of nervous system, which are responsible for the motor activities, are called the motor pathways. Classification of motor pathways is given in the later part of this chapter because the knowledge of role of different parts of nervous system is essential to understand the classification of the motor pathways. Spinal cord and cranial nerve nuclei. Motor neurons. Activities of skeletal muscles are executed by the impulses discharged from alpha motor neurons situated in ventral, anterior, gray horn of spinal cord and nuclei of many of the cranial nerves present in brainstem. Alpha motor neurons in the spinal cord, which innervate the extrafusal fibers of skeletal muscles, are responsible for the contraction of muscles in upper limbs, trunk, and lower part of the body. The gamma motor neurons, which innervate the intrafusal fibers of muscle, are responsible for the maintenance of muscle tone. Motor neurons of the cranial nerve nuclei situated in brainstem send their signals to the muscles of neck and upper part of trunk via cranial nerves. Final common pathway. Activities of a particular skeletal muscle depend upon the excitation of alpha motor neuron, also known as lower motor neuron, in the spinal cord or cranial nerve nuclei. This is the only pathway through which the signals from other parts of nervous system reach the muscles, Fig 144.4. Hence, the alpha motor neurons are called final common pathway of motor system. Functions of motor neurons. Motor neurons responsible for the contraction of skeletal muscles are arranged topographically in the ventral gray horn of spinal cord. Neurons situated in the medial part of ventral gray horn innervate the muscles near midline of the body called axial muscles and muscles in the proximal portions of limbs called proximal muscles. These two types of muscles are involved in the adjustment of posture and gross movement. Motor neurons in lateral part of ventral gray horn innervate the muscles in distal portions of the limbs called distal muscles. Distal muscles are involved in the well-coordinated skilled voluntary movements. Motor neurons in cranial nerve nuclei of brainstem innervate the extrinsic muscles of eyeball and muscles of face, tongue, neck, and upper part of trunk. These muscles are concerned with ocular movements and movements of facial expressions, chewing, swallowing, and movements of head and shoulder. Motor neurons are situated in the nuclei of cranial nerves 3, 4, V, 6, 7, 9, X, 11 and 12. Cerebral cortex. Cortical areas concerned with origin of motor signals are the primary motor area, premotor area, and supplementary motor area in frontal lobe and sensory area in the parietal lobe. Details of the cortical areas are given in chapter 152. Cortical areas send their output signals to spinal cord via corticospinal tracts and to brainstem via corticobulbar tracts. About 30% of the fibers forming corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts take their origin from primary and supplementary motor cortex, 30% from premotor area and remaining 40% from parietal lobe, particularly from somatosensory area. Cerebellum. Cerebellum plays an important role in planning, programming and integrating the skilled voluntary movements. It is also concerned with the maintenance of muscle tone, posture, and equilibrium. Cerebellum receives impulses from proprioceptors of muscle, vestibular apparatus, cerebral cortex, brainstem and basal ganglia. It interprets these impulses and sends signals to motor cortex, reticular formation, and nuclei of brainstem. Role of cerebellum in motor functions is described in detail in chapter 150. Basal ganglia. Basal ganglia play an important role in the coordination of skilled movements, regulation of automatic associated movements and control of muscle tone by sending output signals to motor cortex, reticular formation, and spinal cord. Functions of basal ganglia are explained in chapter 151. Classification of motor pathways. There are two methods to classify the motor pathways. In the first method of classification, motor pathways are divided into pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts. In the second method, motor pathways are classified into lateral and medial systems. Pyramidal and extrapyramidal pathways. Motor pathways are classified into pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts, depending upon the situation of their fibers in medulla oblongata. Pyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts are those fibers which form the pyramids in upper part of medulla. Pyramidal tracts are the anterior and lateral corticospinal tracts. These tracts control the voluntary movements of the body, chapter 143. Extrapyramidal tracts. Motor pathways other than pyramidal tracts are known as extrapyramidal tracts. Extrapyramidal tracts are, medial longitudinal fasciculus, anterior and lateral vestibulospinal tracts, reticulospinal tract, tectospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, rubrospinal tract, olivospinal tract. Extrapyramidal tracts are concerned with the regulation of tone, posture, and equilibrium, chapter 143. Lateral and medial motor systems. Depending upon the location or termination, motor pathways are divided into two categories, namely the lateral system or pathway and the medial system or pathway. Lateral motor system is phylogenetically new and medial motor system is old. Lateral motor system. Fibers of this system terminate on motor neurons situated in lateral part of ventral gray horn in spinal cord, directly or via interneurons, and on equivalent motor neurons of cranial nerve nuclei in brainstem. Components of lateral system: lateral corticospinal tract, which arises from different areas of cerebral cortex and terminates in the alpha motor neurons situated in lateral part of ventral gray horn of spinal cord. Other details of this tract are given in chapter 143. Rubrospinal tract, which arises from red nucleus in midbrain, chapter 143. Part of corticobulbar tract, which arises from different areas of frontal and parietal lobes of cerebral cortex along with corticospinal tracts. Part of corticobulbar tract belonging to lateral motor system terminates on the nucleus of hypoglossal nerve and motor nucleus of facial nerve. Fibers from hypoglossal nerve innervate the muscles of tongue. Fibers from motor nucleus of facial nerve innervate the muscles of lower part of face. Functions of lateral motor system: lateral corticospinal tract activates the muscles of distal portions of limbs and regulates the skilled voluntary movements. Rubrospinal tract facilitates the tone in the muscles, particularly the flexor muscles. Corticobulbar fibers of lateral system are concerned with the movements of expression in lower part of face and movements of tongue. Medial motor system. Fibers of medial motor system terminate on motor neurons situated in the medial part of ventral gray horn of spinal cord, via interneurons, and on equivalent motor neurons of cranial nerve nuclei, situated in the brainstem. Components of medial motor system: anterior corticospinal tract, which arises from different areas of cerebral cortex and terminates in the alpha motor neurons situated in medial part of ventral gray horn of spinal cord, chapter 143. Part of corticobulbar fibers of medial system, which arises from different areas of frontal and parietal lobes of cerebral cortex along with corticospinal tracts. Fibers of corticobulbar tract belonging to medial motor system innervate the muscles of trunk and limbs, muscles of jaw and muscles of upper part of face. Lateral and medial vestibulospinal tracts that arise from lateral vestibular nucleus and medial vestibular nucleus, respectively, Chapter 143. Reticulospinal tract, which arises from reticular formation in brainstem, Chapter 143. Tectospinal tract, which takes origin from superior colliculus of midbrain, Chapter 143. Functions of medial motor system. Anterior corticospinal tract is responsible for the maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Fibers of corticobulbar tract belonging to medial motor system, innervating muscles of upper part of trunk are involved in the maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Fibers innervating muscles of jaw and face are involved in the movements of chewing and movements of eyebrow. Vestibulospinal tract is concerned with the adjustment of position of head and body during angular and linear acceleration. Pontine fibers of reticulospinal tract facilitate the tone of extensor muscles and regulate the postural reflexes. However, medullary fibers of this tract inhibit the tone of the muscles involved in postural movements. Tectospinal tract is responsible for the movement of head in response to visual and auditory stimuli. Upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. Neurons of the motor system are divided into upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons, depending upon their location and termination. Upper motor neuron. Upper motor neurons are the neurons in higher centers of brain, which control the lower motor neurons. Upper motor neurons are of three types: motor neurons in cerebral cortex. Fibers of these neurons form corticospinal, pyramidal, and corticobulbar tracts. Neurons in basal ganglia and brainstem nuclei. Neurons in cerebellum. Motor neurons in cerebral cortex, which give origin to pyramidal tracts, belong to the pyramidal system, and the remaining motor neurons belong to extrapyramidal system. Some controversy exists in including the neurons of extrapyramidal system under the category of upper motor neurons. However, considering in terms of the definition, neurons other than lower motor neurons are to be named as upper motor neurons. Lower motor neuron. Lower motor neurons are the anterior gray horn cells in spinal cord and motor neurons of cranial nerve nuclei, situated in brainstem, which innervate the muscles directly. Thus, the lower motor neurons constitute final common pathway of motor system. Lower motor neurons are under the influence of upper motor neurons. Applied physiology. Effects of motor neuron lesions. Effects of lesions of upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons are given in Table 144.3. Effects of lower motor neuron lesion are the loss of muscle tone and flaccid paralysis. Effects of upper motor neuron lesion depends upon the type of neuron involved. Effects of upper motor neuron lesion are: lesion in pyramidal system causes hypertonia and spastic paralysis. Spastic paralysis involves only one group of muscles, particularly the extensor muscles. Lesion in basal ganglia produces hypertonia and rigidity involving both flexor and extensor muscles. Lesion in cerebellum causes hypotonia, muscular weakness, and incoordination of movements. Paralysis. Paralysis is defined as the complete loss of strength and functions of muscle group or a limb. Causes for paralysis. Common causes for paralysis are trauma, tumor, stroke, cerebral palsy, condition caused by brain injury immediately after birth, multiple sclerosis, Chapter 143, and neurodegenerative diseases. Types of paralysis. Paralysis of muscles in the body depends upon type and location of motor neurons affected by the lesion. Different types of paralysis are given in Table 144.4.